Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today, diving into the numbers of Wolves versus Nuggets. Where might Minnesota find some vulnerabilities for Denver, and where do the teams not match up in the best way for Minnesota? What some of the keys to the series will be, it's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. We are inching ever closer to the start of the series on Saturday evening. We're almost there. We're almost there. We know it's the Nuggets, and that's what we're going to focus on today here on the show. Going to talk a little bit of X's and O's. Well, not as much X's and O's as kind of stats-based. What are the Nuggets good at versus the Wolves? What I want to do Thursday and maybe a bit into Friday is more the X's and O's. I'm in the midst of rewatching all four Wolves-Nuggets games for the regular season. Obviously, guys were in and out of the lineup. I get it. But it's important to see like what changed over the course of those four games and what might that tell us about this series. So we'll do that from an X's and O's standpoint more the next couple of days. Today will be more of, and of course it's all related, right? Because one can kind of, you look at the numbers and you say, okay, this is what we expect to happen. Let's see what it looks like in practice on the court, and vice versa. Like if you see something on the court and then it's like, okay, well, let's see if this is just a one-off, in this moment to this game, or is this, indicative of a trend, right? So both are important. Today, I want to focus more on the stats side of things, and we'll put it all together here over the last couple shows this week. A big thank you, though, off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, so the Timberwolves split 4 games with the Nuggets in the regular season. They won the first one way back in October. That was the Timberwolves' 4th game of the season. They came in 1-2. Remember, they had the bad loss in Toronto, came home and won a game, lost in Atlanta. They collapsed in the second half. Denver came in 4-0. The Timberwolves beat Denver, held them to 89 points in that game. And it was kind of Jokic and nobody else. Like Jokic had a solid game, although he turned it over 5 times. Murray had 14 points. Nobody else got to double figures for the Nuggets in that game. Game 2 didn't come for a lot further down the line, right? Like I forget exactly when. Well, no, it was in March. Yeah, they didn't play again until March. They went from November 1st, I said October, November 1st to March 19th without playing each other. March 19th game, of course, Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't on the floor for that game. So Nickeil Alexander-Walker was in the starting lineup, and actually Rudy Gobert didn't play in that game either. Remember, that was the game with the Wolves bench. Garza playing 22 minutes off the bench. TJ Warren played in that game, and the Timberwolves only lost by 3 points. Game 3, the Timberwolves won, held Denver to 98. That was in Denver. The Timberwolves did have Gobert in that game, but they did not have Karl-Anthony Towns still. And then the 4th game was just recently. The Wolves actually still didn't have Towns in that game either. That was... Why did Towns not play in that game? I wonder if that was the back-to-back. That's what it was. That was the road back-to-back, and Towns did not play in it. That was just a couple weeks ago, April 10th, and the Wolves lost by 9 in that game. So I want to take... I'm not going to go super in-depth into all 4 of these games today. I want to do a little bit of that tomorrow. What I want to do today is look at the profile for each of these teams. And I want to look at... Oh, I should note, by the way, that 3rd game when the Wolves beat the Nuggets, shorthanded Wolves beat the Nuggets. Jamal Murray didn't play for the Nuggets either. So that I should say that now before Nuggets fans listen to this and start, yelling about it. So anyway, in terms of each team's profile, what each team is good at and how they match up, we did this for the Suns, and it gave us some pretty good, outlook going into that series in terms of turnovers and how that was going to be a major factor, and offensive rebounding, how it could be a major factor. But that was a weird one because like Phoenix was a good offensive rebounding team in the regular season. They just weren't in the postseason. Now, part of that is the Wolves' size, right? We also talked about how free throws would make a big difference in that series. And sure enough, they did. It was a big talking point. I guess they always are. But in this matchup in particular, Wolves Suns, I thought it would be a big deal. Wolves Nuggets, these teams are actually far more similar in a lot of ways. So I went through and I looked at the 4 factors on cleaning the glass. I broke down the shot profiles of each team offensively and defensively, looking at the frequency and the accuracy in both, and try to find any trends in terms of things to look out for. So let's start here. The Nuggets are the 6th best offensive rebounding team in the league. If you look at the total regular season, according to cleaning the glass, 28.6% of available offensive rebounds the Nuggets grab. The Timberwolves finished the year 10th in terms of defensive rebound rate, which they improved as the year went on. And that was something that they were really bad at in recent years, even under Chris Finch. And they improved this year. And like last year, it was weird. They were such a bad defensive rebounding team, despite having Rudy Gobert, but they were much better this year. Part of that was the health of Karl-Anthony Towns. Part of it was some guys just like Nas, and some guys just continued to improve on the glass. Nas actually took a slight step back from last year, but McDaniels rebounded his position better at times. It was just overall as a team, getting a full year of Mike Conley instead of D'Angelo Russell, it adds up over time. Timberwolves were just a better defensive rebounding team this year than the previous year. But rebounding was an issue in the season series against Denver. In the first game, which the Wolves won way back on November 1st, the Timberwolves won the rebound battle by a single rebound, although they did give up 4 more offensive rebounds to Denver than the Wolves managed themselves. The rest of the games against Denver, including the other game they won, the Wolves lost the glass battle, and it wasn't particularly close. They were a -12 on the glass in game 2. And game 2, which again still didn't come until March, was the 3-point loss with no Rudy and no Karl-Anthony Towns. The Wolves lost that game on the glass by 12 rebounds. Game 3, and they gave up 3 more offensive rebounds to Denver than the Wolves had themselves. Game 3, they lost by 7. All 7 of those, I should say, they lost the rebound battle by 7, and they were all on the offensive glass. They had the same number of defensive rebounds, but they gave up 7 more offensive rebounds to Denver than the Wolves managed themselves. And the last game, the Wolves were a -9 on the glass to Denver and had 2 less offensive rebounds than Denver. So you add all that up, and the Timberwolves for the season were a -29 on the glass against Denver across 4 games. Now, I was worried about that going into the Suns series because the Suns were a good offensive rebounding team. I was worried about Nurkic on the glass. I was worried about just the Wolves securing defensive boards because they're just so inconsistent when it comes to that. They sometimes also long rebounds from long jumpers, which I expected the Suns to shoot a lot of mid-range jumpers that had long rebounds, weird bounces, etc. Caroms to the middle of the floor in between the guys down low rebounding and the guards leaking out. I was worried about it, right? It ended up being the Wolves had a massive size advantage. We talked about this, I think, on Tuesday's show, that the Wolves were tied for the NBA lead through round 1, through the first 4 games of round 1 in terms of total rebounds, and the Suns had the least amount of total rebounds of any team. The Wolves absolutely crushed Phoenix on the glass. That's not going to happen in this series. Denver's a fantastic rebounding team on both ends of the floor. Again, 6th in offensive rebounding. And if we want to talk about defensive rebounding for Denver, they're not quite as good on that end of the floor. They're 13th, but they're still they're just a shade behind the Wolves on the defensive glass, and they're much ahead of them on the offensive glass. Minnesota's only 23rd on the offensive glass. So rebounding overall concerns me for this game because Jokic is awesome on the glass, especially on the offensive glass. Aaron Gordon is really, really good as an offensive rebounder. And they've also got guys who, like Jaden McDaniels, was this guy for Minnesota against Phoenix. We talked about this earlier this week as well, where McDaniels had several of these offensive rebounds where just corner crashes killed the Suns. The Nuggets do that too. And Aaron Gordon, he'll hang out in the dunker spot or whatever. He's always crashing the glass on offense. And they've also got role players off the bench that'll pick up an extra possession or 2 for the game. During the regular season, they had several guys average more than one rebound, more than one offensive rebound per game. Michael Porter Jr. was a big part of that. They got guys off the bench, Christian Brown, et cetera, who do the same thing. In the playoffs, believe it or not, Christian Brown's only playing 13 minutes a game, but he's averaging more than 1 offensive rebound per game. That's an extra possession per game that Christian Brown in 13 minutes just coming off the bench. crashing the glass, sneaking in, grabbing an extra offensive rebound and getting his team an extra possession. Those are the types of things that can be absolute backbreakers in the postseason. And Jaden McDaniels was that guy against Phoenix. And we saw a little bit of it from some other guys too on the Wolves side. But I worry about that with Denver because you've got a couple of very skilled offensive rebounds who do it all the time in Jokic and Gordon. And then you've got guys who sneakily are just fantastic on the glass. Believe it or not, Jaden averaged 3 offensive rebounds per game in that series against Phoenix. That's a Jokic-like level in terms of offensive rebounds. Jokic and Gordon were each nearly 4 offensive rebounds per game in the 5 games against LA in the first round. During the season, though, these guys, Jokic and Gordon are the main 2 you got to look out for. Porter Jr., like I said, Brown, some of these role players, they're all really adept at generating those extra possessions for Denver. That's a major concern of mine coming into this series. The Wolves have to find guys, put bodies on people, secure rebounds. There were moments in the Phoenix series when the Suns hung around. Yes, the Wolves dominated, by and large, the 16 quarters. The Wolves, I know that it was close at halftime basically every game, but the Wolves pretty much they completely dominated roughly half of those quarters, and they won maybe another half. There was only a quarter of the quarters, if you will, 3 or 4 quarters where Phoenix really hung around, and it was a lot of offensive rebounding that kept Phoenix around. And that concerns me with this matchup with Denver. The solution is just putting a body on guys. And then it's also matchup wise, knowing it's tricky because one of the other things I want to talk about is playing with pace, and the Wolves should get out and play with pace against Denver. It's one of the few teams I would say Minnesota should try and run against, try and speed up the pace, try and speed up Denver on their end of the floor as well. But you have to get a rebound first. And I have a feeling that's going to be a massive factor in a Nuggets win in the series is going to be rebounding. And it'll be a kind of a theme throughout the series. We'll have to keep an eye on. All right. A couple other things, including one area where I expect Denver to be much better than they were in the regular season. And because of that, it almost feels like a weird anomaly in the regular season in this matchup between the Wolves and Denver. And it's also one of the reasons I want the Wolves to try and play fast here in this playoff series against Denver. So we'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. Does your mom have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, or is she outdoorsy? It's never too late to show your mom your love this Mother's Day with DoorDash. Surprise your mom with flowers, gadgets, self-care essentials, all in one place delivered right to her door. No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and more. You can pair flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. If she's a bookworm, get a bookstore gift card. If she loves a good latte, get a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You can't go wrong. Get thoughtful gifts she deserves with the convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive to her door with DoorDash. Mother's Day is coming up, not this weekend, but the one after, so it's close. It's 10 days away. Shop with savings that would make her proud. With the Dash Pass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fees, apply, and terms apply as well. Get a Mother's Day gift as unique as she is with DoorDash. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. Get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. That's Locked On NBA, LOCKEDON NBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL now that we are deep into the playoffs in both leagues, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Right now, the Nuggets are favored by 4.5 points at home on Saturday. We don't have an official game time yet, but it'll either be, I believe, 6:30 Central or 8:30 Central. The Nuggets are favored by 4.5 on Saturday night. The Timberwolves are plus 150 at plus 4.5 in terms of the spread. The series overall, actually, the Wolves open at plus 185. They're down to plus 164. So a lot of Wolves money coming in. Denver's minus 205, which is, I don't know, heavier odds than I would have expected, I think, to beat the Wolves. Of course, the Wolves were also underdogs in the series against the Suns, and they swept them. So, anyway, that's over at FanDuel. Wolves are plus 164 for the series and plus 180 and 4.5 point underdogs as 4.5-point underdogs on Saturday in game one. You can get your $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume with all the shout. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. So an area that, besides rebounding, I want to get into turnover rate. Denver does not turn the ball over much as an offense. They actually were just 10th in the league in turnover rate, 13.1%. The Wolves were the league's worst, or really in the bottom three for much of the regular season, but they improved mightily toward the end of the season. Part of it was, honestly, Cat's injury, I think, forced them to clearly change their offense a little bit, and Ant continued to improve. He had multiple no-turnover games toward the end of the season, which, for as much as the ball's in Ant's hands, it's an incredible development. The Timberwolves finished still 23rd in the NBA in turnover rate, according to Clean the Glass, 14.5% turnover rate. And again, Denver just over 13%, which was 10th best in the league. However, in the regular season matchup, Denver actually turned the ball over far more than Minnesota. In fact, Denver lost the turnover battle in all 4 games. Minnesota had 2 less turnovers in game 1, 10 less turnovers in game 2, which game 2 was actually that 3-point Nuggets win with a no Rudy, no Cat Timberwolves team. Denver still turned it over 10 more times than Minnesota. Game 3, Denver turned it over 4 more times, and the same thing in game 4. So overall, across 4 games, again, Minnesota was in the green in terms of turnovers in each of the 4 individual games. But overall, the Timberwolves were a plus 20 across 4 games in terms of turnover rate. Or I should say total turnovers against Denver, a plus 20. Yes, they were what I say before, a minus, let's see if I can find it here, a minus 27 on the glass. They were a plus 20 in turnovers. So how is that for a weird kind of stat nugget from the playoff or the regular season series? The Timberwolves lost the glass in 3 of the 4 games and overall were a minus 27 on the glass. They won the turnover battle in all 4 games individually and were a plus 20 in the turnover battle. My theory on this, there's a couple things. One, it's the way the Wolves play Jokic. It's playing him with somebody big like Towns. And then they actually early in the season, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday once I'm done watching all 4 games back. But the Wolves tried guarding him one-on-one with Towns at times until Towns would get into foul trouble. And then oftentimes when Towns was in foul trouble or not available, they would try and double Jokic. And of course, then that turns him into a passer, and, he's an incredible passer. We know that, and the Nuggets are maybe perhaps more dangerous when he's forced to pass the ball. However, he turned the ball over a bunch in this season series, and a lot of it was in transition, and it's one of the reasons I think the Wolves should speed the Nuggets up. Jokic had 5 turnovers in the first game. He had 3 turnovers in the second game. He had 4 turnovers in the third game himself, and 5 turnovers again in the fourth game. So he had 5 turnovers twice and 4 turnovers once in these Wolves-Nuggets matchups. And otherwise, I say he turned it over, or I'm sorry, I read the wrong column. He had 2 turnovers in the last game. The last game is when he absolutely dominated, and that was no Karl-Anthony Towns. Rudy did play in that game. Jokic had 41, 11, and 7, and just 2 turnovers in that game. Shot 16 of 20 from the field. We'll talk more about the strategy against Jokic. I do think Karl-Anthony Towns will draw that assignment. That's how the Wolves will guard him, right? You need Rudy in that kind of guarding Aaron Gordon, floating free safety type role, similar to how the Wolves play Josh Giddey when they play OKC, right? He plays off of Gordon and, will essentially just guard the paint. That's the right move, is to put, and I know that TNT guys or whoever won't understand that. They won't care to try to understand it, but that's how the Wolves are going to play this, right? And talk about a different assignment, right? Towns guarding Durant in one series and guarding Jokic in the next, and credit again to Cat for being willing to do whatever it takes, whatever he's asked to do, really all season for the Wolves. But I think he'll be guarding Jokic. And I think the Wolves should try and speed this game up. I know Minnesota plays at a slow pace. That was a thing all season. They played a little faster once Towns went out for the year. They hovered around 24th in pace. And actually, if you look at well, it depends on where you look, really. 24th on Basketball Reference, but Cleaning the Glass actually has the Wolves 28th in pace. Frequency of transition and pace are two different measures of this, and Cleaning the Glass and Basketball Reference have two different, very different rankings when it comes to this. But Denver prefers to play slow. And I know Jokic can be dangerous in the open court. I saw what he did to the Lakers the other night. Like, I get it. However, that's also when he's more likely to make some of those mistakes. And both teams are incredible in the half court defensively. I shouldn't say the Nuggets are very good defensively in the half court. But for the Wolves to get some easy possessions against a really good Denver defense, they should be speeding the game up wherever possible. They should be able to run on this Nuggets team. They just have more athletes. It's a younger roster, more shooting, which is great for, getting good shots in transition from Minnesota, whether it's Towns trail threes or guys like Alexander Walker, McDaniels running to the corners. Minnesota should push the pace when given the opportunity. Speed Denver up, try and force them to commit turnovers, force the issue offensively when it comes to Minnesota to not have to go against Denver's set defense. I think there's some room for to take advantage there. Also, related to free throw shooting, which I would lump this into a similar conversation. Both teams are pretty middle of the pack in terms of free throw rate. The Wolves, I should say defensive free throw rate. The Wolves, though, drew a lot more offensively. Denver was actually third to last in the NBA in free throw rate, according to Clean the Glass. They didn't get to the line all that often, which is maybe a little bit surprising if you didn't watch a lot of Denver this year. And it basically is Jokic, right? Jamal Murray didn't get there a ton this year. It's just not his game. Now, he plays differently in the playoffs. We've seen that going back to the bubble year, right? So that may change here. But for the regular season, he didn't get to the line very much, and he really didn't in the first round of the playoffs either. Jokic is going to average 5+ free throws per game. He did in the regular season. He did it in the playoffs against the Lakers. He's the one you got to look out for. But besides him, the Nuggets are, back cutting and jump shooting off of Jokic passes. They're not drawing a ton of fouls. Minnesota, on the other hand, does draw a lot of fouls. They finished 8th in the NBA in free throw rate. It was much higher until their late season kind of nosedive after the cat injury in terms of free throw differential. But there are a ton of opportunities for Minnesota here. And I think playing in transition, playing in the open floor, forcing the issue is one way to get Denver into the penalty quickly and for the Wolves to get into the bonus and get themselves a lot of free throw opportunities. That's one way to do it. So I think pushing the pace has all of the above benefits, right? Not going against Denver's set defense, trying to force Denver into some mistakes themselves, trying to get them to play too fast and not having to deal with Jokic in the half court. If you get them to speed up and play faster, that's an advantage for Minnesota. And then also trying to get Denver into foul trouble, I think is a huge thing as well. So playing with pace to try and force the issue, create turnovers, create open three-point opportunities, that's super important. All right, a couple more things I want to get to here in terms of the matchup, and that's how we'll close out the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play, or in the case of the NBA playoffs, whistle on the play. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, too. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and download it free now on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, couple more things to get to here to close out the show. We talked about rebounding. We talked about turnover differential, and related to that, free throw rate, forcing the issue in transition, trying to force Denver to make mistakes because they will do it. Even if they didn't do it overall this year, the Wolves forced it out of them a lot this year. I also mentioned that I think transition offense is a way for Minnesota to get some good three-point looks. And corner three-pointers are actually an area where, like, if you watch the Lakers series, I should say, it seemed like they were leaving a lot of corner 3-point shooters open for LA. And part of that was converging on the paint to deal with AD and LeBron and guys like, Hachimura and Torian Prince and others didn't necessarily make Denver pay all that much on those corner 3-point attempts, right? Well, for the season, Denver didn't actually give up very many corner 3-point attempts at all. And when I started watching back some of the Denver Minnesota games, there were a couple early, like the first game of the year, Denver was crashing on Rudy every time he rolled. They were literally guys from the corners were abandoning both corners. And I think sometimes it may have just been, fourth, fifth game of the season, and maybe Denver wasn't all on the same page. So I'm curious to see once I get to the rewatch the most recent game, if that was the same strategy against Rudy or not. I'm not there yet, but that type of a strategy plays right into what the Wolves want to do, right? Rudy loves short rolling and kicking it to the corner. Ants become very good on if teams load up on him, which I don't necessarily think that Denver will do all the time. If they load up on him, put 2+ on the ball to kick it to the weak side corner and for an easy open 3-point attempt. Denver for the year, though, was actually allowed the fifth fewest corner 3-point attempts in terms of frequency. Only 8% of allowed opponent shots from Denver, which is fifth best in the league, were corner threes. Minnesota offensively was eighth in the league in generating corner 3-point looks themselves. 10.7% of the time, 10.7% of the Wolves 3-point attempts were from the corners this season. And in the first round against Phoenix, I thought that would be a key to the series. And it was. Maybe not in the same way because the series was over so quickly, and really none of the games were all that close. But Minnesota actually, they shot a higher percentage of their overall field goal attempts from the corners in every game of the Phoenix series than they did during the regular season as a whole. More than 11% of their shots in each game, and including game 2 and game 4, was over 13% of their field goal attempts came from the corners, came from corner 3-point attempts. For the regular season, it was about 10.5%, or actually 10.7%, which was 8th best in the NBA. So was that a function of how Phoenix was defending? And I think partly yes, but I think also the Wolves have done a better job of hunting those corner 3-point shots. That's going to be important against Denver, and Denver's going to try and limit those. But it's also pick your poison, right? Like you have to allow something. It's one of the reasons I was a little nervous, not a little, I was nervous about the Phoenix matchup and also the Denver matchup. Denver does shoot some mid-range jumpers. The Wolves generally allow those, right? It's a pick your poison league. You have to give something up. What is it going to be? And how open is the shot going to be? Obviously, giving up corner threes, nobody should want to do that. But you can't do everything, right? And like even in the way that the Wolves would want to defend a Jokic Murray pick and roll, right? You're going to need help. The low man's going to step up, and eventually you're going to have one guy guarding two. That's it. If you're going to stop elite players like Jamal Murray, like Nikola Jokic, like Anthony Edwards, and you're going to load up on that side of the floor, someone's going to be at least partially open. It's trying to force the offense into making a really difficult pass, hopefully deflecting it or recovering fast enough and getting your rotation, making your rotations be crisp enough to get off a good contest on whatever that shot is. If it is a corner three, if it's a corner three from Aaron Gordon, fine. If it's a corner three from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that's a little bit different. It's a lot different, right? So it's pick your poison. If the Wolves are going to defend a pick and roll by trying to have Cat play at the level, or whatever, like that's going to be what they try and do, right? They want Cat to play at the level, and they want Conley or Nickeil Alexander-Walker or McDaniels to fight through and over screens as much as possible, to stay attached at the hip as much as possible to Jamal Murray, and force him to do, to shoot and make difficult decisions. And then ultimately, if he's going to make shots, they've got to make them be difficult shots for him to try and make. We'll talk more about those coverages again once I'm done watching all the film from the previous games, and we'll talk about that on Thursday and Friday. But all that to say, rewinding to my initial point here, corner threes will be there for Minnesota in transition, and they should be able to generate those shots. It'll be a good way to score against a non-set Phoenix defense. In terms of defensive matchups, I'm pretty interested to see how the Wolves match up with Phoenix. I think I talked about this already. I think Rudy's going to guard quote unquote Aaron Gordon and act as a free safety. And they're going to try and put McDaniels on Jamal Murray. But the great thing is like with Phoenix, you were worried about three guys, right? With Denver, you're mostly only worried about two, at least in terms of shot generation in the half court. It's Jokic and it's Murray. Michael Porter Jr. is kind of the wild card here, and I'm curious to see how the Wolves choose to defend him. My guess is that it's going to be some combination of whoever's not guarding Jamal Murray, right? I think it's mostly going to be McDaniels on Murray as much as possible. And Ant, Conley, Alexander Walker, all these guys are going to kind of rotate through on Michael Porter Jr. And then Caldwell Pope. Actually, you'd prefer to have Conley, obviously, and Caldwell Pope than a Michael Porter Jr. But between Nickeil Alexander Walker and Ant, and potentially Nas, depending on lineups, they're going to have to try and guard Porter Jr. And to me, he's the key in this series. It kind of in a similar way as I thought Karl-Anthony Towns was going to be the key in the Phoenix series. And it wasn't just magnified because of the how quick that series was over. I think Michael Porter Jr. is going to be a huge factor in this series as kind of that third best offensive weapon, or third offensive weapon, I guess, for the Nuggets. So I want to get a lot more into, as I said, the actual X's and O's of how these teams defended each other, what changed from game 1 to game 2 to game 3 to game 4, and how we can expect these teams to play against each other here on Saturday in game 1. So we'll get into that on Thursday and Friday. A lot more to dive into on this matchup, but it is, I'm telling you, going through all these numbers, these teams are a lot more similar than they are different in terms of the types of shots they want to get, the types of shots they'd prefer the opponent takes. We didn't get into like shots at the rim protection, et cetera. We'll talk about that too. Obviously, it's an area the Wolves will have an advantage, but the takeaways here are the Wolves got crushed on the glass by Denver in the regular season. That can't happen. They did a great job in the turnover battle. You can expect Denver to take better care of the ball in this series. And then in terms of pace, speed the game up, force the issue, score against a transition defense for Denver. And we'll talk a little more about that too in the coming days, like what I really have in mind there, how Denver actually did against transition. Even if overall as a team, they'd rather play slow, what was their actual transition defense like? Try and get corner threes and, limit those opportunities for Denver. So lots to get to Thursday and Friday. More X's and O's discussion, more matchup discussion. We'll get to all that then. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.